Hello, and thank you for tuning into the New Orchard Show. A couple of weeks ago, I ran into an acquaintance at a local park. She's a mother of three. She had her children with her, a 3-month-old baby, a 3-year-old boy, and a 5-year-old girl. Her husband, as far as I know, holds a very demanding corporate job that requires frequent international travel, often cutting into their weekend family time. She drives a very fancy SUV, the kind of a car that suggests a comfortable life. When she saw me from the distance, she offered a smile, but it was tired, it was somewhat forced. I asked how she was doing and whether she enjoyed being a full-time mum, free from spreadsheets and strategy decks, and her response kinda caught me off guard. She glanced at her baby, then at her 2 children playing in the distance and said, "I'm fine, I just need to survive the next 10 months before I go back to the office." Survive? That word stuck with me. Why would a mother describe this phase of her life in those terms? I started thinking, was it sleep deprivation, loneliness with her husband away so often, or something deeper? I didn't really get a chance to ask. A few sentences later, she told me she had to take the kids to a cafe for lunch, and that was that. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why has parenting become so exhausting, so overwhelming, and so in conflict with our modern life? It's no secret that raising children in an era of rapid technological change present challenges the previous generation never had to face. Humans aren't really wired for this level of hyper-novelty. We're being hit by wave after wave of change, barely catching our breath before the next one crashes down. And in all this chaos, how often do parents stop to consider their own mental well-being? Clearly, not as often as they should. According to Emerging Minds, this is an organisation dedicated to mental health of Australian families. Up to 1 in 4 children in Australia are being raised by a parent with mental illness. International research shows that up to 36% of psychiatric patients are parents with dependent children. While most parents report good mental health, more than a quarter are experiencing moderate to serious psychological distress, and nearly 30% have struggled with anxiety and depression since having kids. These numbers aren't just concerning, they're getting worse. And this brings me to my guest today, Sam Jockel. Sam is an award-winning social entrepreneur, speaker and innovator in digital community building. She started as a social worker in education, developing a deep understanding of the needs of families and schools. In 2010, after having her first child, she launched Aldi Mum, a Facebook page that quickly grew to 170,000 followers. 2 years later, she co-founded School Mum, which now has over 440,000 members, solidifying her as a leader in online engagement. In 2017, she founded ParentTV. This is a groundbreaking video platform providing research-backed parenting advice from top experts. Recognizing the need for better parental support in schools, she built ParentTV into a global resource, offering on-demand guidance to parents, schools, and childcare centers. But what drew me to Sam was her latest project, Seen, the film. This beautifully crafted documentary explores how a parent's mental health, shaped by their own upbringing, unresolved trauma, and societal pressures, directly impacts how they raise their children. It highlights the importance of self-awareness and healing, so parents don't unknowingly pass down their struggles. The film introduces this idea of reparenting, which is working through one's emotional wounds to break generational cycles. I really believe Seen has the power to open eyes, spark a lot of reflection, and help parents understand why they feel so trapped in survival mode all the time. More than ever, this conversation is absolutely necessary. Before we begin, I want you to hear the trailer for Seen. If you prefer to watch it, you can find a link in the show notes, so you can pause here, give it a watch, and then come back.
I was saying all the right things. I'm doing what the book says to do, and it's still not working.
I left the older kids when they were just 2 and 4. It haunts me, you know, because there's many years that I can't get back.
I was all about power and control dominance. I yelled at my kids for the smallest things.
I wasn't reacting as bad as what I was brought up with, so I thought I was doing better.
Yeah, to know yourself, you have to know where you come from. And to know where you come from, it means knowing your own parenting.
I just snapped at her more. I just spoke to her more rudely.
Because that's what happened to me, and that's what happened to my mum, and that's probably what happened to her mum's mum.
You cannot use logic to escape the programming of your own childhood.
As adults, we are juggling all the balls and we find it really hard to attune to our children.
How do I make sure that parents understand I'm not being generous in saying, I need you to think about your own mental health. I actually need you to do it for this kid.
Your children have come to trigger you to heal.
We're always looking somewhere else for the problem, and I did that for 20 years. But this is where the real gold lies. We always talk about leaving your house as a legacy. I've scrapped all of that. I say you're leaving yourself in them as a legacy. And that is the most beautiful gift that keeps on giving forever.
And now, without further ado, let's hear it from Sam Jockel. Sam, what personal experiences or transformations in your life inspired you to create Scene? And how did those experiences shape your vision for the film?
I guess being the founder of ParentTV, which is a video streaming platform for parenting advice, where we kind of work with some of the world's leading parenting educators. And then also being a parent myself. So I've got 3 children who are now 17, 14 and 9. I guess I've been doing ParentTV for probably a good 5-6 years before the documentary kind of came into, I guess the picture. And really, I guess through doing ParentTV, initially with parenting content, so much of the focus of what experts were talking about, and I guess what I was focused on at home was very much about tools, tactics, tips and tricks for how do we get our children to behave in certain ways. And a lot of that was just so that we didn't feel annoyed and frustrated because their behaviors are really challenging at times to deal with. And I feel like I actually embodied a lot of those tips and tricks and really took stuff on board for a long time as I was doing ParentTV. And I got to a point with my kids where I kind of was brought to my knees a little bit, and I did all the things and it still wasn't playing out how I guess the books say it's meant to be playing out. And it was at that point in time where kind of a whole bunch of stuff collided for me personally that I started to realise there was more to it than just knowing the right thing to say to get your kid to behave in a certain way, or the right discipline to do that. Yeah. And that's where this whole entire lens shift happened for me, was around the birthing of kind of the documentary, where I realised for me as a mum, it wasn't so much about what I was doing, but who I was being. And that was the bit that was missing with parenting. And this is the flip of the doco, that it's not about what we do to each other. Sometimes it's about who we be, like that presence piece. And that really just started this journey of, and how as we show up as parents, our kids are actually reflecting who we are. So if they're not okay or they're struggling, that's actually a reflection that we're not okay and we're struggling, that they're actually our mirrors. So I could go into this. That was just a lead in from that question, because it's so loaded and there's so much there. Actually, someone emailed me yesterday and said, I watched the trailer and I know enough about this stuff to know that really you're just showing us the tip of the iceberg of, and what sits underneath this is quite substantial, that kind of no one really understands and sees in terms of the journey of what brought this to the light of day. And I'm like, that's a really good analogy, I think, for what it is that we're doing here and what it's been.
That's a really interesting insight. You must know this. There's quite a lot of books out there that have flooded the market, which are attacking this theme from different angles. I think Gabor Mate has been touring for years now, promoting his books and documentaries. He does talk a lot about the intergenerational trauma that's impacting how both children and adults develop. Are you familiar with his work? And if you are, did it inspire you at all?
Oh, absolutely. So I remember watching The Wisdom of Trauma a few years back when it first came out. It's probably quite early in watching that. And one of the other experts on our platform, Dr. Vanessa Lapointe, she's based in Canada, because I'm pretty sure Gabor comes out of Canada. There's another guy called Dan Siegel as well. I feel like there's a lot going on over there in Canada. So yeah, like some of the experts, even Vanessa Lapointe on our platform, and certainly were talking kind of about this stuff. And I know that she was kind of a student of Dan Siegel, and Dan Siegel and Gabor Mate actually wrote a book together, which is Don't Let Go of Your Kids, or I can't remember, something like that. So yeah, like this work has been bubbling and definitely, yeah, just even stirred a lot of stuff in me, and then that kind of all just came together. I mean, the thing about this documentary though that I think is like quite unique in some ways is that we have experts around it in a way, kind of speaking a bit to some of the emerging research. The actual core of this documentary is 4 everyday parent stories, and it's very real and it's very raw, like parents who didn't have lots of resources and money, like got a First Nations dad, a parent whose parents came here as refugees, like when she was a kid she was living in cars, someone who came over as an expat and is now a single mum who's originally from Germany, and then just a dad who's just married in a relationship. So there's a lot of diversity there in terms of story, but also just real people who the odds weren't for them in some ways, but they kind of share their story about how they unraveled that and transformed their families.
Would you mind if we jump out of sequence here a little bit and take a small step back and talk about ParentTV, as I think it's quite critical when it comes to your story. Can you tell us what it is and why did you create it?
Yeah. So ParentTV is a video streaming platform. Think of it a little bit like Netflix for parenting resources. So we've brought together some of the world's leading parenting educators. There's about 50 experts on the platform. We have over 2,000 videos. Most of them go for about 5 minutes. And really they're just answering questions that parents are asking about all different kinds of things. So we work with psychologists, psychiatrists, pediatricians, sleep consultants, nutritionists, safety education specialists, like technology, you kind of name it, it's on there. And we've mapped it kind of 0 to 17. And I guess it really came out of pre-ParentTV. I have a degree in community development, and I ended up developing some online communities when my kids were small that grew to about 650,000 parents, and I ran those for, I don't know, maybe like 6 or 7 years. And I don't know, after that point, I could see what was happening online. Parents were coming online and looking for answers to questions, but, it's too much of a choose your own adventure, and you're pretty much in a vacuum when you're on Facebook anyway, and someone will agree with you or write something that you just, it's not a safe space for credible information. And so I really saw that something was needed. So in some ways I created ParentTV as a brand. We don't actually have an opinion as ParentTV, but we find credible voices and we bring them together to help create a safe space for parents to come to find information that is actually based on kind of the latest emerging research. There's a lot coming out at the moment. So yeah, so did all of that, raised capital, build company, build the platform. But I think there was still a missing piece in it all, where there was still a gap with parents probably really spending the time and giving it the attention that you need to solve some of these problems. And we came to realize that it's because in some ways we kind of all feel like, we've kind of got this in some ways. Oh, I know what this is like, or I'm doing better than my parents did and I was fine, so my kids will be fine. And there's lots of that, so I don't need help, or it's all just too confronting and hard. But what we're witnessing going on with our kids is just the fact that the environments with which they're being raised in now, and it's no parents' fault, it's just a result of like the economy and two working parents and technology, that's actually quite destructive for child development, and we're starting to see children really struggling and big mental health issues and all of these things going on. And I just really, like, I'm at the forefront of the research and information that's coming out, and it's clear. Like, we do know what's going on and why. There's some not very easy truths in there. It's no one's fault really, but I felt very passionate about the fact that we needed to try and find a way to reach parents with some of this information and really help them understand how important this is and how it really needs their attention. And I guess the documentary was the work that I've done to try and do that in a way that is really engaging, hopefully, and quite compassionate, but also very truthful about what's happening, and does show some hopeful paths forward, but there is some work for us to do here.
I've recently recorded an interview with an author who writes a lot about declining standards in education, particularly in Australia. What he said to me about a certain set of issues is kind of similar to what you just said, about the issues inherently not being anyone's fault. But my question to you is, if that is the case, whose fault really is it that we somehow got to this point? How do you rationalize this argument?
Look, I think what I have learned about how to move forward and solve problems, which is what I do in my life as an entrepreneur, is that sitting in blame or shame will never ever result in a good outcome. So I guess my perspective is this has happened, and it is not going to serve anybody to spend our time and energy trying to figure out who's to blame for this. Like, and I could potentially, I mean, you could unpack a whole heap of different things, but this is just who I am. I'm way more interested, and I know enough to know what's needed is for us to step outside of this and to witness it and to come together and say, like, okay, what do we do next? And we're not here to throw anyone under the bus, but to come together with a vision of something different and better for the future, for our kids and for ourselves, knowing this isn't working. I guess it's what I know. I would say it's pretty clear that this isn't working. It's not working for anyone. It's not working for the adults. It's not working for the kids. Like, I would say that most people that I know and talk to are really struggling. And when the adults are struggling, the kids are struggling. And so it's actually the adults that we have to help. That's pretty much the basis of a lot of what the documentary is talking about. Our kids are just reflecting what's happening for us. They're not the problem. Like, it's us who are struggling, and our kids are struggling because we are in the lead of that. I just say we're the captains of the team, of our families, you know. When our captains aren't okay, when the leaders aren't okay, like, that filters down. And if we're not, if our kids are actually in the lead, in some ways, sometimes they are calling the shots, or just because we don't want to upset them and their happiness is in the lead, us making sure they're happy, that's actually not good, because kids were never designed to be in the lead as well. And it actually is quite harmful and a big responsibility for them as well. So partly, sometimes I just think we have forgotten who we are, and we've forgotten what child development is, and we've kind of strayed a bit from understanding who kids are and what it is that they actually need. And part of, I think the solution is a remembering. We've forgotten a lot and become very distracted by the dopamine hit of what's available now so that, we can kind of try to avoid the pain, but all that's doing is kind of making it worse.
How do you think societal attitudes towards parenting and emotional healing have evolved over the last decade or so, and how does scene challenge or reinforce these narratives?
Look, I think there's a massive emergence of this conversation. I mean, I just know because it's pretty much my Instagram feed, like your Lewis Holmes, like your Diary of a CEO. Like anyone who listens to podcasts probably knows the Diary of a CEO podcast, right? I've been listening to that for ages. See that, Stephen? I was like, I joke, he took my podcast. Like, I'm never going to have a podcast that big. I don't even do a podcast. But I do go, I've been saying for ages, I'm an entrepreneur, spend my life working with entrepreneurs. And I can tell you, they pretty much all have trauma. Like, nobody does what you need to do to found a company and raise capital if you are not, like, you are slightly crazy, or you, like, there's something just a little bit, you want it in a way that is just not quite healthy to be able to do what it asks of you. It asks something of you that isn't human. So you have to have a little bit of broken human in you to be able to do it. And I know my journey was healing that broken human in me, but I had to face that on my journey. But so what you notice about his podcast, and this is all related, is he talked to people, and then you could tell he started to figure out, oh, well, these people I'm talking to have these interesting backgrounds in childhood. So then he just started talking. If you track his podcast, then he just started talking to people. Some of his first things were like, tell me a bit about your childhood. And then he started talking to like trauma experts. And so when you look at how that emerged, it's like he started out just with this entrepreneurial podcast and started to see the connection. I could see him doing it, of like, wow, there's this like pattern of these people who have these like challenging upbringings. Like somehow this must be connected. And then suddenly he was diving into that. And then suddenly he started, and now his podcast went from Diary of a CEO to pretty much like all about childhood trauma and all of these various different things, And so, and then other people, like those people start to lead the way of a big conversation. And then you've got your Jay Shettys and your Lewis Holmes. And then suddenly like all of these, so, and then obviously Gabor Mate, like, so it's just out there and happening. I still don't know how like fully mainstream it is, because I still talk to people who just have no idea who these people are. And despite the fact that they do have millions and millions of followers, it's still a kind of niche that I don't think is fully like the real house, the housewives of like your average person just knows what that is, but wouldn't know what the Diary of a CEO podcast was, despite the fact that they look like they're very large. But yeah, so I guess I kind of just saw this. Yeah, there's just an emergence. I guess the thing for me, and I talk to parents about this all the time when I talk to them, our kids are actually really emotionally intelligent, often more emotionally intelligent than us. Part of the downside of that is that means with some things they're actually in the lead when they shouldn't be. And they shouldn't be, not because there's something wrong with that, but just because that's a big responsibility for them to be leading us versus us leading them when they're actually younger than us. When our job as the parent is to be that safe base that kids can kind of lean into, versus kind of seeing us as their adults kind of going, I see my parents' trauma. Like, I think this is happening even in your like 20-year-olds who are looking up at their 40, 50-year-old parents. And so I'm like, they've nearly surpassed us in some ways in understanding all this stuff because we didn't get this education. And, and so I feel sad for this generation coming through that we are unable to lead them in a way that I think you just need when you're that age. Like, it's too much for you to have to feel like you're carrying yourself and your parents, like in terms of that social and emotional piece. And so I'm really passionate about equipping people in more like their 40s, 50s, like 30s, who kind of missed out on getting this education when they were kids. It was just be seen, not heard, and suck it up. Or, I do remember being told, like, it's not about how you feel. Like, you need to get rid of those. It's, use this, and just very much numbing and a dumbing down of feelings. It's nearly at the other extreme now, where sometimes we're actually too leaning in that direction, but the balance has to come back. But certainly I feel like to truly help our kids as the adults in this world, we have to do our work, heal our pasts, and really start to lean into and make friends with understanding how to sit with and feel all the things and be okay. And we need help with that. We don't know how to do that very well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. The pendulum is at the other extreme, with hard overcorrection towards feelings, and there are evidently dangers with that too. Ideally, you'd want that pendulum to be more in the balance center, but that's not how a pendulum works. Can I ask you about your role on the documentary? Did you produce it? Did you write it? What components of it were you responsible for?
Yeah, so I'm the producer. So ParentTV is the production company. I run ParentTV. I guess the director and I were both pretty aligned and understood the story that we wanted to bring to the light of day. So both of us individually had our own journeys to really seeing ourselves and the impact that we had on our children that we missed. Until the lights came on, and then we were like, oh my gosh, like I've been thinking it was them, but it was actually me. So we both had that reckoning, I guess. And so, I mean, all the experts in the documentary from ParentTV, all the parents that are in it were brought to the table through networks of mine. I funded the first 6 months of filming before I set up and managed to get support from Documentary Australia on their platform so that we had DGR status. Then I was kind of involved. I mean, lots of pretty extraordinary things happened for this documentary. I say I raised, but it's like I didn't raise, but as just the work that we were doing, this was put in front of someone who showed up and said, I want to finish funding the film, and gave us $325,000. But I've been managing all of that. And so the director really directed the film and put all those pieces together with the editor and had the crew. And I guess I've been, I don't know, in some ways she did the art and I gave her the tools, and we both kind of had the vision for where it was going, if that kind of makes sense. It was definitely a team effort. Yeah.
In your research phase for the documentary, did you come across any particular studies or emerging findings in neuroscience or psychology that kind of surprised you and then became pivotal to the documentary's message?
Yeah. So we worked with, Professor Selena Bartlett is in the film, and she's head of neuroscience and neuroplasticity, and is particularly working in something called parental neuroscience. And I think the most, I say, frightening and extraordinary kind of discovery of what's emerging in the research at the moment is that pretty much that parent-child interaction is the brain building blocks of our children's mental health in the first kind of 2 to 5 years of life. And the level of significance that is if people truly understood that. And so what's happening at the moment is because of phone usage, and I mean, this is just hard to hear, but true. I'm not talking about kid phone usage. I'm talking about parent phone usage. Our children are not getting the level of parent-child interaction because we don't understand how important that is, and we think they're fine. And we're even talking babies, what they now know in that first 6 months of life. And I'm the first to say, with my kids, when my 17-year-old was born, smartphones didn't exist until she was 7. But my 10-year-old, I had a smartphone when he was born. I remember breastfeeding him on my phone, thinking it was just downtime, not thinking that me actually looking at my baby while I was breastfeeding him was actually building his brain pathways to be able to understand empathy and how to track emotion and like facial recognition and a whole heap of different things. So babies can't tell us, hey, this really matters and this is what I need from you. But all these things have got in the way of how nature intended things to be and are starting to have like an extreme impact on our children's brain development without us actually realizing. Because, you know, so I'm the first to say I did those things like because I didn't know any better. And to me, I was like, well, as long as he's not crying, like, then he's fine. And even things like attachment and there are some things I don't want to go into with this documentary that we know, but yeah, just around that attachment relationship between that parent and child and how important that is and how that, and how children need to have the same person looking after them for like a good 6 to 12 months to be able to map and track and understand, you know, when they say children don't have empathy or can't read body language or all this, like there's a reason this is all going on and we're starting to find out. And it's a lot to swallow, but as I constantly know, there's a lot of grace here too, because we're going to need a lot of compassion for ourselves as we continue to uncover these truths, because it's no one's fault. This thing just happened and we're starting to learn now what the consequence of that is. I say it's like smoking or asbestos. Nobody knew what was happening. Nobody knew it was killing them. It's kind of the smoking and asbestos of our generation. And we're starting to get some information that's telling us the consequences of what those things are actually doing to us, or particularly our children.
I want to ask you about the government-enforced lockdowns of 2020 and 2021. I'm wondering if that influenced the themes of the documentary at all, particularly around isolation, mental health, and the parent-child relationship.
One of the stories that's central to the film, Joe, his kind of turning point was COVID. So he does have a statement, I think it was in the sizzle reel, or he talks about it, where he says, you know, I was a father for 18 years, but I've only been a dad for 2. So his wife was his partner was an essential worker during COVID. So he was actually at home having to look after his kids. And he realised that, like, he was looking after his kids for the first time in his life, and they were 8, and he'd had kids for 18. He has 5 kids, but he had 2 younger ones, and that he had never truly looked after his kids, and he didn't know what he was doing or how to do it. And that was his mirror, where he woke up and just really struggled and was like, I had no idea what his partners had been doing, had no idea what this actually took, had no idea that he didn't really have a relationship with his children. And that was his journey. So yeah, I mean, that's a central story. That's his central story. But yeah, that was a really big wake up.
It's interesting because so many people have managed to wake up from all kinds of slumbers during that traumatic time, like this father in your documentary that you've just talked about. I've heard this so many times over the last few years, people being angry but also kind of grateful that it did happen because it led them to something bigger and more relevant. Why do you think modern parenting has become so incredibly challenging? Despite the abundance of resources and technology around us, there's a lot of parents out there who are really struggling. What is that? What do you think is happening?
I think that we don't understand who children are and what it is that they actually need. And we've just bought, I guess, the lie. I mean, I don't want to be one of these people that's like, oh, capitalism. But really, like, there's more psychologists working to work with companies to teach them how to convince you to feel insecure and buy their products than there are psychologists working to help you. Like, we have been gamed as humans. Like, we understand enough about human psychology that it is now being used against us so people can profit. And so I think we've just been groomed to think that our needs are nice big houses and shiny cars and pools for our kid and the latest Nikes, and we're all a part of it, and that's what we think life is. That's what we think our needs are. But actually, there's these like baseline human needs that we have that no one's talking about, that take over or bring us down, and those things are delight in me, play with me, comfort me, protect me, help me organize my feelings. Now, these things come from a concept or a program called Circle of Security, which is also featured in the film. But once you truly come to understand that children's needs aren't, even though they will say to you, the latest iPhone, a queen size bed, fairy lights in my room, like all those things are fun. They don't know how to say, hey, Mum, I really need you to delight in me. I really need you to help me organize my feelings. I really need you to watch over me and to play with me or to protect me. They don't say that, but that's actually what our children deeply need from us. But it gets lost in the noise of, I guess, all the media and the marketing and all the things that are coming at us that isn't our fault. Like, it's everywhere. Like, we didn't ask for it. It just happened. And yeah, so that's why it's really challenging, because no one understands who they really are and what they need in terms of human biology anymore, because the noise of the world has kind of taken over, and that's happening for our kids. And yeah, I mean, I know for me, as I've truly come to understand this, it's why people who have all the things in the world, you can, some of the unhappiest people are some of the richest people in the world, like, though, because they think that they're the thing until they get all the things, and then all those feelings are still there. It's like, this isn't enough. This isn't, it's like, because the things are actually, do you have people in your life who are delighting in you? Like, that's actually a really important thing that we need as humans. And it's, but we don't know how to have those conversations because they feel weird, or they're not usual, but we will be trying to get those needs met in all the wrong ways, because we don't know how to get them met in all the right, like, we don't know how to ask in the right ways because we don't even have a language for it. This is a hard thing to help people at scale, because the unraveling work of this it's not something that just easily happens. Like, it's a journey and it's a focus, and it needs your time and attention.
You strike me as somebody who has an abundance of empathy for parents in general. Were you always like that, or did this level of empathy develop in you as you started creating ParentTV content, or even this documentary we're discussing today? My personal attitude is that I want to know who caused what issue, by virtue of whose decisions we find ourselves in this predicament. Not because I seek punishment of any kind, merely trying to understand the sequence of events with key players and societal trends. My read on you, on the other hand, is the opposite of that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the impression that I'm getting is that you'd say, don't worry about the past, let's get everyone together, and let's heal as a community, productively pushing forward. Which is really interesting, and I'm curious how making this documentary changed you as a person, and if it had anything to do with your positive attitudes.
Yeah, so if you had have met Sam, my husband used to call me the Ice Queen.
Based on our interaction today, I find that very hard to believe. There's nothing icy about you, Sam.
Yeah, 5 years ago, I was so angry at parents, like doing ParentTV. Like, I'll admit this because it's a good question. I was pissed off. parents weren't using ParentTV. Schools were buying it, wanting them to like give it to them for free. And it wasn't about me. Like we had Maggie Dent and Dr. Johnson. We had the best experts on the platform, and things were not going the way that I wanted them to go. And parents weren't doing what I wanted them to do. And I was working really hard, and I was doing everything I could to make their life so easy, like to solve this problem. And I was angry. Like I would say at times I had rage. I was so pissed off at parents as a group. And I knew, and that energy wasn't good energy. Like if you get up and you try and talk to people to get them to do something, and you're just pissed off at them and angry at them because they're not like doing the right thing or whatever, like nobody, it's like making somebody feel terrible is not a good motivation to help them actually start to move in the right direction. But what I actually realized was it was never about parents or pissed. Like I was actually just angry. Like that's how I treated myself. Like I was very harsh towards myself. I didn't have very much compassion. Like I was a entrepreneurial type person who like there was no compassion. Like you perform and you don't get it wrong and we go like, and because that's the bar that I had for myself. Like there was no compassion in me for myself. I was like a high performance person until it just brought me to my knees. And like I went through 2 years of just really unpacking my own trauma and unpacking my own childhood and unpacking and really finding compassion for myself, because I was doing all the things and it still wasn't enough, and things were still going a way that I didn't want them to go, and I had no control over it. And the more I tried to control it, the more I thought it was just in finding the answer to fix it. Who's to blame? What's to like? There was just I've been down so many paths, and none of those paths were the answer. Like I had nowhere else to go, literally, but compassion. And so, yeah, I think really my compassion for parents is actually just based on my compassion for myself. Like I don't have it all together. Like my kids probably still spend too much time more time on their phones than I would like. I'm doing the best that I can. Sometimes it's really hard because I know probably more than most people know about what this is doing to our kids. And sometimes it's still too hard for me to step in, and I just am watching something happen that is breaking my heart. But I'm beat. I'm beat from how hard it is to do all the things that I have to do in a day. I have nothing left. I don't have the fight in me. And so those days I either spiral into shame, spiral into blame, but neither one of those energies in some ways results in anything that's good. Or I just say, yeah, this is really hard and I'm doing the best that I can today. And that's actually enough. Because if my kids see me do that, then they will do that when it feels too much for them. They'll say, you know what, it's just a really hard day today. I'm doing the best I can, and that's enough. I'm just going to go to bed and we're going to get up tomorrow. It's going to be a different day. And that's all we can do. Like I just learned, and I feel it the more, life is really hard. Raising 3 children is really hard. My husband and I know I've produced a documentary and run a tech company, but I still have a mortgage and pay school fees, and I'm pretty much, you know, breaking even on expenses versus income, you know, like still trying to make on my company and my life. Like, I just go far out. Like, this is really hard. And, you know, it's really hard when I'm in bed at 8 a.m. in the morning on the weekends because I really need to sleep because I'm exhausted. No, my son's been up for 2 hours playing Fortnite or computer games, thinking, that's not great. By the time we get up, he's a bit dysregulated and feral but I just really needed the rest, and he just happened to get up, and my husband and I might be lying in bed going, you get up, no, you get up. And he's a full-time teacher, you know, like the struggle is real. That's why I have so much compassion, because I need compassion for myself. I'm like, heck, and I'm not even a single parent, right? I have a partner, I have a husband, I have grandparents who live near us and help out. Like, I still feel like, my gosh, like I can't even imagine what some parents must be feeling and living through who don't even have the level of support that I have. It is really freaking hard, like really hard.
You've conducted some audience testing recently. What was the initial feedback from these screenings? Was the feedback in line with what you've expected? And what did you think was the most surprising piece of feedback you've received?
Yeah, some of the people who watched it, I wasn't sure how it would land. Like, some people are going to really struggle with this documentary. And there were a small handful that really did. It's a little bit confronting. And it's a very big piece on personal responsibility. So we don't go into blame or shame. We just go into the only pathway forward is personal responsibility, really. And that's really hard for people who have backgrounds that have been challenging, because they are having to work really hard to change some of that story. But there is actually no other way. As much as that sucks, like, and they don't have to, but it's like the only way. So yeah, I think the younger generation love it. I think maybe, yeah, there is the amount of people who are like, even who have parents who are like, I want my parents to watch it, like my parents up. My parents haven't watched it yet. They'll be watching it in 2 weeks. But I'm their child. They know who I am. And I mean, I'm not in it, but yeah, there is a lot of anticipation in me once this is actually released into the wild as to what is actually going to come back at us. Yeah, but I think it will be good, but there will be people who do struggle, because it is a hard truth when our kids are struggling that we have a place, that we've played a role in that. The compassion part is that you did the best you could with what you knew, and now you know better. That's when we can start to do better, and that we often just do what was done to us. So we don't even see it because it's just what we know. That's not on us. There's a lot of compassion there. But, and why this matters for this generation of kids is, I'll talk about this a little bit. When we grew up, I grew up, when my parents maybe showed up and didn't parent us ideally in terms of when we needed something or were struggling with emotions, and that was just shut down and we were like told to leave or whatever, we'd go outside and play it out with our friends and climb trees. And there were all these things that we did that actually were protective factors that helped us to move some of that and work it out. And we lived in more community, so if there were other adults, so sometimes if our parents couldn't be what we needed, we would get that a little bit from the neighbours, or I don't know. Whereas now, families are very isolated, people on their phones, communities broken down, kids aren't outside playing on the streets. Like, the protective factors that were at play when we were children, that buffered when our parents maybe weren't ideally showing up in the way that they probably needed to for us as children. Whereas now we may be doing the exact same thing that our parents did, but the protective factors aren't there that are buffering that for our kids. So they're feeling the full force of it in a way that we didn't, because there's no relief. And we think they're fine because they're sitting on screens or playing games or like online or doing this and that, and they seem to be fine because they're not doing anything. But actually what's happening in there is, yeah, we're seeing it in the mental health, depression, anxiety. Like that's how it's coming out. Like they're actually showing us that there's something off. There's no outlet for this. They need an outlet. So their body takes them down and it takes over and it forces the outlet upon them because they're not getting that in their day-to-day processing. It's like the overwhelm of all of that. Like your body has to come into homeostasis with that. We can't just play video games and watch TV and be happy, and everything's fine. It's like we are designed to live in an equal kind of homeostasis of pleasure and pain. So if we're just pleasure, and we're not actually building some level of pain in some ways into our lives, then it takes us down and will force it upon us to try and regulate us, because that's not natural or how we were designed to operate, like dopamine slot machines. Like, so, and when you start to realize there's a biology at play that you can't outsmart, you got to start working with it. We think we can outsmart it, but it's mental health is showing us that we cannot outsmart it. We cannot outsmart the reality of what it means to be a human, which is like welcoming and opening ourselves up to grief, pain, sadness, disappointment, joy, pleasure, happiness. Like it's all of it. And we're picking and choosing, and we are creating synthetic kind of ways for us to just get the good bits, not realizing we can't outsmart this, even though we think we can. And the mental health crisis is showing us. And so now that we know that, it's like you actually have to build space in your life and your kids' lives, pain and disappointment and grief and all of these things that we don't want, because that's no fun. But actually that's just what it means to be a human. It's just part of the story. You can't outrun it.
I think that's really interesting, and I also think there is some kind of a wave of change just on the horizon. I'm not quite sure how to frame it, but I'm seeing more and more people desiring, at least symbolically, some kind of a punch in the gut to somehow wake them up from the slumber and snap out of the old proclivities, just to start paying attention to the important things again.
Well, this is what I'm looking at, like the ice baths and all. So all of that is forced pain. So that is like the science of, I'm going to force pain upon myself, and when I get out, it's going to result in like the ecstasy of the high. So that's gaming. When you start to understand human biology, and that there is this like biological drive for us to be in this kind of homeostasis of pleasure and pain, that you can't outrun either one. They just kind of live together. And so now you've got people starting to force pain upon themselves, which actually results in like a hit of kind of pleasure. But again, there is like, I have been listening to some stuff on this. There is like there's a danger in that as well, to a small degree, of like, life will deliver you those things on a platter. You don't need to chase them. Like, just pay attention to what's going on, because you're going to, like, instead of just trying to force this human experience upon ourselves, just be human, because it will just naturally happen. Like, you will naturally be disappointed. Things will not go your way. Like, learn live in reality of what's actually going on rather than chasing this synthetic. Yeah, like, I don't know. I've learned for me, because I probably was someone who maybe chased that and was interested in all of that stuff. Since I've just started to feel much more grounded in my body, in my life, in my home, like just sitting with my kids sometimes is awesome. Like I'm there. Like we're just there and we're just laughing. And that's enough.
Just being present.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's taken me a long time. That wasn't an easy place for me to get to. Like I had to fight for that. But it's like it called me. I could feel it. It's like there's something here that I'm missing that is more than just the game. It's like my humanity in its like true essence. And it's a beautiful thing, but it's not an easy thing, but it's real.
For those people who are skeptical of the link between parental healing and child development, what do you think Scene will communicate to them?
I guess hope. For me, the documentary is all about hope of what's possible, and just seeing some examples of people who have walked that path and that it's never too late. That's the thing. Most of the parents in the films, kids are older. Like they're not 1 or 2. Like Joe's kids are 21 and 18. They're actually in the film and they talk about their story a little bit and who their dad was when they were younger and who he is now and that transformation. And they were quite older when he started to do that work. And so, yeah, I think it's just hope. It's never too late.
Obviously, what we're trying to do here with this interview is promote the movie, promote Scene, promote this documentary and make sure that people go and see it and engage with the material in a serious manner. But if you were to give advice to the members of our audience prior to seeing the documentary, what would you say are the most urgent actions parents and communities can take right now, based on some of the insights and statistics shared in the documentary?
Take yourself along to see a psychologist, a counsellor, or get support for yourself. Like that would be my number one thing. Like if your kid is struggling, don't send them, send yourself. And what psychologists, like often a lot of my mates who are psychologists and some of the people who work with ParentTV, they've actually stopped seeing kids altogether. Like they will see your child, for an hour a week or an hour once a month, and you're with your child every day. Like you are the key to helping your child, but you've got to help yourself. Like get the help that you need to be able to help them. Let them help you be that for your child.
Everything that we've been discussing here today in this interview really boils down to this key insight. That's which is super interesting. I don't think people think about it that way. So thank you for saying that. Sam, can you please tell us what is the best way to get in touch with you? How can people find you? Where are you posting? Where are you keeping your audience updated? And where can they stream the documentary? What's the best way to experience this movie? Is it in the cinemas? Is it to stream it? What's the best way to go about it?
Yeah, so seenthefilm.com, that should be pretty easy to remember, is the URL. Film's called Scene the Film. It's launching in Australia in a couple of weeks, in cinemas and a bit of a roadshow. At the moment, we are just doing like community in-person screenings. So people can come to our website and request to host a screening. Part of that is we want to hold this in community and bring people together because we're actually the answer to the problem. So we don't just want to keep supporting this, just sit in your home, watch it, and then click the next thing and click the next thing. This is something that we need to sit in together, and hopefully it helps to inspire and spark conversations because we're the answer for each other to the question, really. So people can reach out about that. We have been selected for the World's Leading Conscious Film Festival in the US to premiere in May. So I'm heading to the US in May. We're in a couple of festivals over there. Once they finish, which will probably be the end of May, we will release in the US. Again, most of these are going to be in-person community screenings. I'm not sure when we will release like to online stream yet. I can make that decision at any point because I've managed to continue to hold all the cards to how this gets released, which I had to work very hard to be able to do. But because I want to just see what emerges and where this film takes it and the life that it has, and whether we feel like it's not something we want to release online, because it is something we want to hold for people to bring into their communities together, or at some point whether we do. But that story is going to unfold live as we see how this takes shape. And then Canada, I'm going to Canada in September for a release in Canada as well. And then the UK, I probably won't go there, but we do have like a cinema partner on demand who will be doing some stuff in the UK for us, and New Zealand as well. I should say Australia and New Zealand at the same time. But yeah, that's kind of, it's a little bit of an emergence. We're going to see what emerges. We have a bit of a plan here. It is accessible to anybody, like reach out to host a screening. It's just not like click, watch and move on. It's an event.
Yeah, a community event.
Yeah, because that's the kind of vision behind it.
I want to say, you would not be you if you didn't already start contemplating another big project. Is there anything in the pipeline you want to tease out?
My husband and I would say moving to Wollonga and him working in a winery and me having a nice garden. Oh, look, I think for me, for the first time in my life, I don't have a plan. And that's wonderful. And that's something that means I'm here. So I would say my whole life I've always been like, have a plan. This was coming next. And this one is, you know what, I don't have a plan. I'm just here and I'm going to see, which is what I think is the answer to the question, even with kids and child development. Like it's not having a plan for them in terms of what we want to see and how that's meant to go. It's just, who is this person? Who is in front of me? And how do I lean into that to help it be the best that it can be? And listen to it and, understand enough about what I'm meant to be seeing to just make sure it's on track, but really that we're just in this together, seeing what happens next. And that's enough.
You are doing beautiful and impactful work, and my hope is that people who listen to this interview do go and see the documentary and get something positive out of the experience. Sam, thank you very much for finding time for me. This was really lovely and I really enjoyed having you on the show.
No worries, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
Parenting today seems more complex than ever. It's shaped by societal pressures, unresolved personal histories, and the rapid changes of modern life. Scene reminds us that raising children isn't just about guiding them, it's also about understanding ourselves. The way we show up as parents is deeply influenced by our own experiences, and until we acknowledge that, we risk passing down struggles we never intended to. I want to leave you with a quote from Gabor Mate that perfectly captures this idea, and it goes like this. We think that children act, whereas what they mostly do is react. Parents who realize this acquire a powerful tool. By noticing their own responses to the child, rather than fixating on the child's responses to them, they free up tremendous energy for growth. A little something to reflect on. Thank you for listening to the New Orchard Show. If you found this episode valuable and interesting, please consider sharing it with a friend, or even better, leaving a review. It really helps to get these important conversations to more people. Thank you very much, and see you next time.